So here's part 3 of episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We just beat Darth Maul. And Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin are going to have to pair up to save the galaxy. In the meantime, we have an indigenous war with indigenous weapons against high technology or high-tech droids.
All of you, sir. We must hurry. Captain, we are going as quick as we can. We have noticed some of the boomers missing. Maybe they fell off the wagon? Gotcha. We must help them.
Disfamba.
Look around for the boomers. Okay, day. You can count on me, sir.
This is like
out of the way so we can get in the boomers back.
Pigeon English.
Visa need this farmer out of the way so we can get in the... That big log would never move.
Jar Jar is an interesting character. He's similar to like how C-3PO brings a bit of humor to the movies. He is very goofy. He's painfully goofy. Guess he had some element of like goofiness and a humor to it. I know George Lucas liked that character, obviously, because he put him in there, but he thought it was going to really work. Kids must have liked him, his goofy character. I mean, he did make me laugh. And you're always gonna meet those characters, in real life. I'm not saying he's good or bad. I'm not judging him, but there are goofy characters out there. And he does carry the story along. So I'm collecting these orbs, these boomas. I gotta return them to the Gungan warrior.
You found them all. Well done. Now we are ready for battling.
Ready for battling.
Times for a well-earned resting. We must load the last catapulties! Mesa should have stayed in Otokunga! Don't be afraid of Jaja! Go and get them!
think we have to load weapons.
This look very, very safe. Not. Und the catapults, Judge. Ready them, sir, for the boomer.
So I think this is an interesting battle because, like I said before, you got ancient technology. Sorry, indigenous tribe using like high level tech and these big animals. You've got this, I would say, it's just a different technology with the artificial intelligence. And it has that feeling of like, the old battlefield with the British versus the Americans or the Canadians. And in Canada and America, during those wars, they did team up with indigenous, and that's possible all over the planet. The British Empire might have teamed up with indigenous, of Africa and India. It did happen here in Canada with I think it was the Iroquois, the Mohicans. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to research it, but that was a big element to learning too. Like the indigenous people of Canada knew the forest quite well, and they knew the animals and they knew the weather, and it's hard to compete with when you have that home field advantage. And I know the Americans had trouble in Vietnam because the Vietnamese would dig tunnels, and they, like I said, they knew the weather, they knew the area, so that gives you a huge advantage. There's lots to learn about the indigenous people, of the world. And there's lots of movies like Black Robe. There's Last of the Mohicans. The Revenant's good. Lots of Vietnam movies. But if you think of it in terms of wizardry, um, let's say the indigenous shaman, he's going to be able to understand where the water, food, where the buffalo are, uh, where the hot springs are. He'll be able to read the nature, as a shaman, or read the forest as a shaman. And your opposite, like your artificial intelligence shaman or human, is going to read data, to read the weather or the minerals of the area, where the hot spring are, the pH level, or the value of it through its gold, silver, copper. The glaciers can bring water. The rivers can bring dams. So indigenous shaman would detect it with his intuition and reading of the symbols and signs of nature, and the shaman of the technological age would be using weather meters, surveyors, pH, chemistry kits. So there's the two opposite sides of the equation. And I think that's a main battle you've seen in his last 2,000 years. You know, let's go back to the fish idea. Like, is it possible like Jesus is the age of Aquarius? You know, that's why the fish is his symbol. Like I said, the Dogon, the fish hat. So in this age, is that what happened? Is the certain group of people or that just took over and they played a chess game with the indigenous people of the planet and took the land. And I'm not saying the indigenous people of the planet weren't battling before, you know, like there was clearly battles. They have history of battles and weapons. It's just this technological shaman was able to take over. Which seems like magic, but it's technology. And did whatever they could to take over the, let's say we'll call them the force lines of like, you're gonna make money by damming water. You're gonna make money by mining gold, silver, copper, uranium, you know, platinum, diamonds. So learning the earth element is important. Learning the oil element, right? The oil burns, that's fire. Learning the wind element, you can get wind energy. The water element, water energy. Hot springs, healing. So the shaman of the indigenous tribes would just intuitively know that, like I said, and the shaman of the technological tribes would use its instruments and to find it, survey it, you know, scout it out, and negotiate for it, and you know, ultimately use the technology like either negotiation technology or guns, germs, and steel. So when they want a regime change, you see it happening, right? False flag operation, like you can see in the story with Amidala. They were trying to like assassinate her. You can see that at Franz Ferdinand, I think, in World War One. The burning of the, you know, the Reichstag building in World War II, Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin. Some would say 9/11 would be, whether it's a false flag or not, the catalyst would be the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers, again, this is the obelisks of the world. You can see them all over Washington, D.C., you know, Parliament in Canada. You can see it in Egypt. I believe France is the Eiffel Tower. Toronto, Ontario's got the tower. Dubai Tower. Taipei 101 Tower. So you can see it throughout the world that they use the obelisks for energy. It's like a big antenna. So the different temples will be on these special energy lines where they believe the force is. So they would call them Lee lines, and they would build Stonehenge or CERN or the Vatican or Washington, D.C. And then they would build the streets in shapes like the Champs-Élysées, or, you know, like you can see Washington, D.C. D.C. would be like the pentagram and Pentagon. These aren't like good or evil symbols. They are just protective symbols. Like a sumo wrestler throwing salt onto the ring. It's not good or evil. It's just a protective symbol. Like the Wicca witchcraft, they use these symbols, and they're protective devices. You can see the protective device that the Gungans are using around their weapons too, right? And their people. You can see these shields or force fields. So again, you can use the force as a shield. Literally a force field. So again, the Force can be, I mean, used in these weapons the way you can use the, whether it's energy they use or nuclear power or a spark with gunpowder. It's a quick force that explodes like the atom bomb or a cannon or a bullet or your fist. Even shouting in the animal world can have that same effect. So the Force can be, it can show itself in so many different ways. And a good example would be like you see all these different stars, they're exploding nuclear energy. So Anakin's upgrading pretty quick from the pod race to now fighting against adults who are quite experienced with these ships and weapons. But he's got more metachlorians, so he has the ability to defeat them. Plus he's the chosen one, and the chosen one needs to get to the end of the story. And in the game, the controls, this is fun. This is a lot of fun. They make it goofy like Spaceballs, but the mechanics are there. You can feel the game. Takes a bit to get used to.
Come on, R2. Let's shoot those signal towers. What a shot! Our fighters are getting picked off by those vulture droids. We have to do something. You hear that, R2?
So I think this is the Trade Federation we're going after, right? So, you know, Anakin is interesting because he's a slave, and they're on the outskirts of the galaxy. I don't know. It seems like they're into like a mafia zone, you know, over in Tatooine. It's similar to, I think, maybe the Roman Empire and Jerusalem back in the day, but I don't know if he'd be like a fiat currency slave. Is that the symbol? Because they're quite poor out there and they're gambling and there's not too many rules. Not too much Empire soldiers there. So, you know, this is a story of a kid growing up out of slavery. So again, it seems like the Force, he's the chosen one by the Force. Similar to like Jesus or Buddha. So, I mean, the key is like right now he's trusting his instincts, and this is what they've been teaching him, right? And, but in the meantime, the Jedi, they're following the rules of the Order, and ultimately it leads to their failure because for some reason they couldn't sense Palpatine right under their nose. And that may be all of us. We get deceived, you know, maybe it's willful blindness or maybe some sort of bias we have, but they couldn't detect it. So there's a weakness in the Jedi's, you know, their order and their discipline, and they're lacking using that emotion. So when Anakin trusts his instinct to follow his heart and save his wife, he ends up killing, I think it's Mace Windu, and joining the dark side. But he's been told to follow his instinct. I guess it works out in the end because he does balance the force out. So the key element here of the force is metachlorians, and George Lucas might have got it from the word mitochondria, which is it's the powerhouse of the cell. I believe it's a different organism, and it's inside the cells of humans, and that's where all your energy is produced, right? So if you work out hard, I believe the byproduct is lactic acid from these. So you eat some food, the food gets transformed to energy, and there's the B vitamins and all the other vitamins that take the food through this like citric acid cycle, and from there you get energy, ATP. So ADP turns to ATP, and that's pure energy, right? Someone would take creatine phosphate when they're working out because that extra phosphate helps bind, to the ADP, which creates ATP. So the phosphate would be like similar to phosphorus in it's kind of like a match. Like if you're gonna put that into plants for growing, it's like a match. So it works the same with us. So these metachlorians or mitochondria will give you energy. If you work out hard, you'll feel it, the lactic acid burn. And I believe the organelles or the mitochondria will eat them up, eat the lactic acid and use it as fuel, so you'll get more mitochondria. And it's similar to like high altitude training with some athletes, and they get more red blood cells. So using that breathing technique, the prana can, stimulate more red blood cells, which is energy, and the muscle activity would get more phosphate, which is like a spark. And you can see like the circle of life where the sun hits the grass. The grass produces like, it's called photosynthesis, and it produces its own sugar, glucose. The cow eats that. The human eats the cow, or another animal eats the cow. And the cycle goes round and round. And this ability to see that, see past the basic symbols, is kind of step one of, connecting to the Force. And Yoda shows it in, I think we go on planet Dagobah system, and he starts talking about how the Force is in all things. But yeah, this is interesting. They're celebrating, and Palpatine's right beside them, and that Phantom Menace is right there, right under the nose, and they can't detect it. That makes the story, that makes the story of the big chess game. And of course, if you're going to take over the galaxy, you're going to have to beat the best. And not only does he outsmart the Jedi, he recruits the best players. He recruits Padme, and he recruits Anakin. And he recruits the whole, the political side, the whole Senate and everything. And that whole emergency powers, like from World War II, that all comes into play too. So that's episode 1. The theme there was the Force, and I think that was a good way to kind of stick to that. And I think it's quite evident throughout it that the Force is guiding the story. So we'll see you next episode, in episode 2. Okay, take care. Later, Jedi Knights.